Foremost, I want to give all of the praises and the glory to the Most High and His Son, Yahweh Bashmel Shah Bashmel Rakak Wadash. Double honor to the apostles of the great millstone that told me what I know today through the Holy Spirit, and as well as giving you, brothers, your deserved salutations for being in the Holy Spirit and furthering this ministry. All right, and shalom to the Akim Wak Wafiyam as well that support we say what we do, and it's your brother Laban. And the reason why I'm getting into this kind of video over here on this topic, because there was a video that I did last week, and it was regarding this woman that was showing that she made $144,000 a year while her man was a stay-at-home father raising the children. And CNBC promoted it to reinvigorate this feminism in mind towards women that have that mindset already, which most women in the Western Hemisphere have a more of a feministic mindset, where women are to be, in charge of certain things rather than men being in charge, for that matter. And I mean, as I mentioned in my last video, I understand what time we're living in. We're not living in a time period where, the currency is so damn good to the point where, you only need just one man to take care of the whole entire household. I understand that people got to go out there and do what they got to do to survive, especially among our people. Okay. But what I'm saying is that this devil promotes feminism for a reason. And just as I've showed in my last video too, this individual, Aaron Russo, I put on post-production, and he was basically being interviewed by Alex Jones about the topic of feminism, right? And as he said, he spoke to one of the Rockefellers, which, if you research them, a very powerful family, and they're like basically equivalent to the Rothschilds down here in the UK, but just that in America instead. So anyway, he said that basically to Aaron Russo, as Aaron Russo was elaborating, what's your take on feminism? Like, what do you think that was all about? As I'm roughly paraphrasing, right? So Aaron Russo said that I think it's a noble thing. I think it's a great thing that women, have their freedoms and their rights and stuff like that. So, he laughed at him and said, Aaron, you stupid, man. The reason why we allowed feminism and funded it, the reason why we funded feminism so that we can tax, reason number one, so that we can tax the other half of the population. And being that you have more women than men. So if you, like I said in my last video, right? So if you can tax that population, then you getting that Skrilla, man. You getting the Skrilla. Okay? And that's what they did. That was reason number one. And reason number two was so that the government can be the father of the children. There comes your schools and all of these different daycare centers you got to send your children to because there's no father in the house. So, if mom's out there working, then she's going to have to leave the children somewhere. Okay? Especially when they're in their early stages where they don't go to school until especially in America, you don't go to they call it primary school down here in England until you turn maybe 5 or 6 years old. Okay, probably before then you're taken to a daycare center. So pretty much your children are set up to being institutionalized by these these governmental constructs like your school systems and your colleges and all of that stuff right there. Yeah, so it was a setup for all of that. But most importantly, what I also want to point out as well is that the women's liberation movement invigorated this feminism idea to women so that basically women can take charge. And when women take charge, guess what? Whole communities fail. This is what happens. All right? Because it's unnatural for a woman to do that, which is what she's incapable of doing. And that's being in a leadership position. Women are emotional for the most part. Women can't make always the right decisions because they're in their emotions a lot of the times. So if you got an emotional person that's leading, what do you think's going to happen? Destruction is going to occur. All right? Men need to be in the positions that they need to be in so that communities can be structured, because men are what? Constructive. So to keep structure, you need constructive individuals, and that's going to be your men. All right. The reason why you have, especially among my people, especially, when you go to these different projects and stuff like that, what do you see? Late teens bugging out, ain't doing anything about themselves, just hanging out all day, talking, shit. And I know the cool, man, because I used to be around these guys. I used to do what they used to do. Okay, so I know. I used to hang around my cousins and that. My cousins used to do shit like that in the States and as well as down here in the UK. All right. Like, I know about so-called black culture in America and as well as in the UK. And it's just about quite similar. It's quite similar. Basically. So, a lot of these young jakes in the projects are up to no good because they wouldn't reared up right. A lot of these jakes didn't come from structured households for the most part, just being honest. Okay? And half of these guys don't even know who their real fathers are. They just know who their stepfather is, though. You know what I'm saying? So when you grow up in those kind of situations, man, you don't become a functioning individual. Now, is it possible that you can become a functional individual? Yes, you can. Anything's possible. But what I'm saying is that I'm just getting down to the point of this topic, is that matriarchal societies fail communities. That's the point that I'm getting at. I'm not trying to, throw dirt on nobody because they grew up like that. Hey, most of us grew up like that, man. Okay, so when I talk about y'all, I'm really talking about myself as well, including. Okay, because a lot of us grew up where we saw the female counterpart in charge. We all grew up in matriarchal settings somehow, some way. Okay, so that's just the thing. So now what we want to do is we want to read about this Indian tribe called the Kazai tribe, right? And what I want to show in this video is that all of these matriarchal societies that they have found, somehow, some way, they're either small towns or they're suffering poverty, or they're both. And I want to show you this, man, because like I said in my last video, the matriarchal model is a failed model. It's failed us as a people grandly. And guess what? It's failing other nations too that are applying this model. So now let's look at this. India's Kazai tribe. The state of Meghalaya in northeastern India is home to the Kazai tribe, which is known for its matriarchal society. In the Kazai culture, property and wealth are inherited through the female line, and women have a strong say in households and communities. Decisions, women are also free to choose their own partners, and divorce is not stigmatized. Okay, so now if you look at Meghalaya is ranked one of the highest states that are suffering poverty. And by the way, when you look at these percentage of these different things that they're suffering because of a lack of, which is what they should have, some of these percentages are quite small. But keep in mind that Meghalaya is a small town with small amount of people, so it's not good at all. It's not a good look for this particular state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to the point in reading on a couple of things, right? So now let's read this over here. So this reads, Meghalaya with 37.05% also has the 10th highest percentage of malnourished people among all the states. This list is headed by the Bihar, 51.88%, followed by Jharkhand. And by the way, this website is an Elamite website which is called the Shillong Times. And in this case, what we're seeing is the rate of poverty which is in this area. So now, where was I? Yeah, I was right here. And we're going to read this again. And followed by Jharkhand, 47.99%, and Madhya Pradesh, 45.49%, and Uttar Pradesh, 44.47%, and Chhattisgarh, 43.02%. Let's read on. So now this reads, on the child and adolescent mortality aspect, Meghalaya is 3.10% occupies the sixth highest position among the states. In states in the country. This list is headed by the Uttar Pradesh with a mortality rate of 5%, and that's quite a bit for a small town. It's a small percentage, but it's actually problematic because, like I mentioned, it's a small town. Okay, another thing, Meghalaya also has the fifth worst figure in the country with 31.70%, 32% of its women deprived of maternal health care facilities. Among the northeastern states, Nagaland has a figure worse than Meghalaya. All right, so these are all of the areas within Meghalaya that I've read prior, before I got to reading about Nagaland. Okay, and guess what? Most of these people are what? The Kazai tribe, which is a matriarchal tribe at that. So we're just getting started in this video. We're reading about the first tribe, Salak. I didn't mean to go there. We're reading about the first tribe, and these people are struggling. Okay, struggling, and they look like they're struggling too. Okay, and that's what I want to show. I want to show that matriarchal societies are failed models, because I said it in my last video and I didn't go in depth. So now in this one, I'm going in depth and I'm showing you any matriarchal society that there is. If they're in effect, they're about to be in decline. They're either poor or they're dwelling in small towns. And also another thing too, there's a particular tribe in China called the Musu tribe or the Masao tribe. Maybe that's the right way to pronounce the tribe. And this tribe supposedly used to be a matriarchal one until then later it became once again to being a patriarchal tribe. Because that's what happens, man. Matriarchal societies fell to the point where eventually men have to get involved in restructuring the people of that tribe. All right? Because it doesn't work. Women leading communities, it don't work. Because women don't have the ability to be constructive. Men have that ability to be constructive. Like, who builds all of these towers? Who builds all of the real estate that you see people dwelling in, and also the real estate that you're dwelling in? It took men to build that. So the point that I'm making is if men are doing all of this building like it's nothing, then what does that tell you? That tells you that men are good at construction. So if men are good at construction, then men are going to be good at constructing communities as well as families. Because guess what? A family is also known as a house in the scriptures. All right. So guess what? To keep a good, well-set, winning family, you need men. It's just that simple. And the Rockefellers knew this very well. Back in the 1960s, now, I can't really speak too much about the 1960s, right? Because I wasn't there. But I've done my research on the 60s, and there was a lot of things going on, as well as you had the Vietnam War. People were coming back from the war, bugged out on drugs, right? Especially more in particular the working class people, people that were already poor at the time anyway, which most of those people got involved in fighting this war. Okay, that was within Vietnam, and at the same time, you had the hippie movement, and around the same time, that's when the women liberation movement came into effect, and that's what really destroyed poor people even more. All right, it broke poor people even more. Okay, because what they were saying is when the women's liberation movement came in, prior before then, there wasn't hardly any prostitution. They weren't as much gangsters, roaming around in the streets. You always had gangsters, even in the 50s and the 40s. You had gangsters, but these people came about more prominently because of what was going on in these urban inner city areas. Because there was no structure. A lot of kids was growing up in these destroyed conditions, these people, and they became destructive. So when you're raising people in a destructive environment, they become destructive. People become their environment. So now these people that are born and raised in that environment, how can they be constructive when they haven't seen construction? They haven't seen men in leadership building and doing things that empowers the community. If they've never seen this. So this is why you need men, because men have the ability to be constructive. Like I said, you see us building towers, you see us inventing things. If you look at most of your inventions, it's all men. Not saying that women haven't invented anything, but it's hard to name a woman that invented anything at this point. You know, I can name a plethora of dudes that invented things. You know what I'm saying? If I see a construction site, if I'm walking past a construction site, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to see a bunch of guys. Why? Because we're good at construction. We're good at engineering and these kind of sort of things. All right. So it's in our role and it's in our duty to lead households and as well as lead communities. Because if they take leadership, they're going to run it to the ground. And that's why you have every single project in the United States of America with all of these different, hyena acting Negroes all around and all of them. And a lot of these dudes are either dead or in jail. That's what the matriarchal societies create. It creates thugs. It creates degenerates. It creates poverty. All right. Now, if you were to go back prior before the 60s, yes, the economy was very well. The currency was high power. The dollar was high power. It only took one man to take care of one whole family. Like, that's how mighty the dollar was. The dollar was on its apex at around the 50s, where it just took you one dude. Like, nowadays, you gotta like work like 2 to 3 jobs just to stay afloat, and even that may not even be enough. All right, but back then, all you could have had is just one simple job, and you was balling. Okay, the whole house was doing good. The whole house was comfortable. Just one little job, because the dollar, the currency was powerful. All right. But I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is at that time, Jake, for the most part, was doing way better. And I'm not saying that they were doing good, because Jake was always in underprivileged situations. But what I'm saying is when you go back to the 1930s, the 1920s and the 1930s, right? And yeah, you had the Great Depression and all of that. But let's just deal with the 30s and the 40s. Around these times, you had Jakes. And these were times when basically women didn't have no rights. So keep that in mind, right? Let's stick to the 30s and the 40s. Around these times, you had a lot of different, you had shops, Jakes that owned so many different, real estate within their own communities. They owned businesses of their own, right? And that's what was going on at the time. And the reason why you had Jake owning businesses and building, obviously, the more business you got, the more you can provide jobs for your people. The reason why that this was going on, and this is what I want to say. Excuse me, I'm confusing things, right? Salakia. We're gonna scratch that. What I'm saying is this, right? When men were in charge, when Jake was in charge of the communities back in the 30s and the 40s, what did you have? You had jobs. You had businesses that were owned by their own people. You understand what I'm saying? Because men were in the positions of power in the community at the time. Because, like I said, men bring construction. Men build things. And when men are in charge of communities and families and households, guess what? Everybody benefits. And that's what you had at the time. You had a lot of Jakes that were working for other Jakes, and it was just all right. It was fine. Okay? So this is the thing. When men are in charge of communities, and I'm going to say what I'm going to say again. When men are in charge of communities, guess what? There's constructability. And when there's constructability, there's also productivity as well. But when you take the man out of the equation, what do you have? You don't have that. You don't have an economy. All right? And that's what we had. We had our own economy between those time periods, between the 30s and the 40s. But see, what did Esau do? What Esau decided to do, Esau went around from different states and saw all of these different communities, so-called communities. I'll just use that term anyway because that's the only word I can really use. But Jake was doing good to the point where they had their own. They could hold their own economically, all right? And that was the time period when men were in charge, when so-called black men were in charge of their own people. But what you have it as you have it today, what you have today is that you have black women leading the community. And guess what? All you have is projects. All you have is, children born out of wedlock, as they say, right? And you just got a whole lot of confusion and destruction because there's no structure there. Yeah. So that's all I'm going to say right there. So if you look at the Musu people now, what we're going to get into, there's a website that I want to read, and it's called thediplomat.com. And really, I'll tell you the truth, I don't really want to have to read this. I just want to bring out key points that I remember reading on this article that you need to know anyway. And as you can see, the title of this says The Decline of China's Kingdom of Women, right? The Chinese Singaporean lawyer, I'll just read this part. Chu Wanghong portrays the slow decline of the culture of the Musao or the Masao out of the last remaining matriarchal societies in the world. And what I'm going to say is this as well. How come we don't have matriarchal societies as well as we have patriarchal societies? How come we don't have the same amount pairing together and competing with one another? Because for the most part, these societies are failed models. They don't work. They don't do good for people. Okay? It doesn't function for people. Matriarchal societies don't function for people. All right? That's why you don't see that. And if there is a matriarchal society in effect, it's on decline, like this one is. And I didn't even know who these people were. They're so insignificant. Not to make fun of them, but I'm just saying they're insignificant to the point where you don't, like, no one even hardly knows about these people unless you do your research. And yes, this same tribe is in a very small town and poor at the same time. And I'm going to show you, right? Because I've already done my research on this already, right? Again, these are poor folk. And you see this woman here, all she's doing is what? Agricultural work. That's what she's doing. All right? Because them people, they don't own anything. So if you don't own anything, then guess what? You have to be a worker for someone else. And that's all these people are. You do your research on these people and you study just a little bit. You look into how they're living and everything and where they're at economically. They're not doing good. And that's what I also wanted to say earlier before. Like, matriarchal societies are not expanding. They're not thriving. They're not being enriched at all. They're just all poor, small little towns. That's all they are. Yeah, just like, for example, look at the so-called black community in America. They're not thriving communities. They're poor because there's no structure and there's no economic expansion there. There's nothing there. You see what I'm saying? So that's just the bottom line, man. That's just the bottom line. Like, these structures don't work. Actually, it's not even a structure. Let me read this. This is Isaiah 24 and verse 5. The earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant. And that's what this white man did. He convinced our people in the West, in America, especially with this women liberation movement, that women can have the same rights as men, and as a matter of fact, lead over men. Yeah, lead over men, and as well as they can be even smarter than men. So men can now also take the back seat and be the stay-at-home fathers, have you will, while the women takes over, right? And all that does, again, is just creates unstable households, unstable communities. This is why they keep fueling this feminism thing. They keep telling you young women, right, that feminism is the way to go about it. so that eventually you can destroy your own family members. That's all it is. The families that come out of you, you're going to just keep them at the bottom, keep them destroyed. All right? That's the ultimate reason why this devil pushes this nonsense. And gets women that are that are already old and they're masculine to convince you that this is the right way to go, when it's really the way to destruction. All right? All you got to do is read about the primal example. When Adam was being led by Eve, what happened? Eve effed them up, and as well as messed all of us up in the very end. As it is written in the scriptures, through her we all died. So when women lead, guess what? There's some destruction that's coming your way, and it's right around the corner. Look at all of these matriarchal systems. They're all under decline. If you do your research, they're not thriving at all. Okay? This is just one of them. And I don't have to go and read and go through a whole entire list of all 5 of them. Okay? They're not rich people. They're not superior economies at all. They're all little. So if you research them, just research them for yourself. You're going to find out is that they're just simply poor folk, poor working folk living in small towns. That right there tells you that these economies, these matriarchal, not economies. These, and by the way, the word economy goes back to the word ecos, which means house. Which it has to take to build a house. You need a bunch of dudes that have the constructive mindset to build a house. It takes men to build a house. All right. So that's just the thing right there. So these things don't work, man. It doesn't work. And the so-called white man, the so-called JOO, they know this very well. That's why they funded this for our community, so that our community can stay stifled in the position that they're in. Okay? Simply put. Now, I want to read this because I wanted to get into this on my last video. And we're going to go and read a little bit of this right here, because this is how it was really done. Okay, this is how things really, when it came to, as it reads, family, land, and households, right, in the Old Testament. This is how we were operating, the right kind of way. So now, let's go and read the point in this article. And what I want to do is I want to start by reading this part. First, let us talk about what we mean by family. Family structure was certainly different in ancient Israel than what we typically see in America today. In one sense, the entire nation was a single. Hopefully this mic isn't too I'll turn it down anyway. Hopefully it's not too loud. So anyway, in one sense, the entire nation was a single family. The fact that we can call the nation Israel demonstrates this. Within the nation, we find the tribes, which according to Numbers 26:52, the verse 56, received an initial land allotment. According to size, the tribes in turn are composed of clans, larger family units that might comprise a village or a region. The clans had a vital social function, which we will discuss below. Within the clans was the most basic unit, the father's house. This is headed by the father, the oldest living patriarch of the family. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren are all under the authority of the father. And the father's house could be a fairly large unit comprised of more than 50 people. And as well as the scripture says, as I've mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, that, when you read the scriptures, you'll read a scripture about a particular nation, and it mentions the house of that nation, like, for example, the whole house of Israel or the house of Edom. In other words, meaning the families of that nation. Okay, and guess what? The family which came from the father, and by the way, the word father means origin. So who you are and what you're going to be is based on your father. It's not based on the land that you were born in, as this world will put it. All right, you come out of your father's. That's your origin. That's who you are. Like it reads in the book of Numbers 1 in verse 18, where it reads that the nations or the tribes of Israel were described by the pedigrees of their fathers. And in ancient Israel, before you went to a priest, you would declare yourself after your father's name and the particular tribe you came out of. Okay? And you would receive your inheritance from your fathers. And as well as when you read scriptures, you'll find out that your fathers would even bless, the fathers would bless the children. Okay? As it is also written in the Apocrypha, it tells you that fathers are a blessing to the children. I'm roughly paraphrasing. It could be in the book of Proverbs, or it could be in the Apocrypha somewhere. But it's in the scriptures where it says that the father is the blessing of the child. Okay? And that's one of the reasons why we as a people are cursed as well. All right? So that's all I'm going to read right there. So yeah, the thing of it is, the house of a nation can also mean the word house can also, you can also use the word house for family. And that house was established by your father. All right? That's just the deal right there. So, these families that you see out here that's being brought out by women that women lead over, these ain't even really real family structures. These are just newly invented constructs that's not biblical, and that's not done the right way. It's something else, basically. Okay? And that's just the thing. Like, a lot of us can't really say that we were brought up in real family constructs, even myself included. Like, I had a father and everything, but again, I still was kind of brought up in a matriarchal setting. All right? Where the first grandparent that I came up with was my grandma. All right? I didn't really know who my grandfather on my father's side too well until I got older. When you're a child and your parents are off to work, they leave you with your grandmother. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how it goes. And it's more in particular, your mother, your mother's mother, which is your grandmother on your mother's side. That's how I was brought up. Okay? Now, was I raised with two of my parents? Yes, of course. But I'm just saying, I was raised to be more around my grandmother on my mother's side. I knew more about my mother's side than my father's side, if anything else. Okay, just keeping it real with you. Showing you that the way Jake operates out here is all based on the matriarchal way rather than the patriarchal way. And that's why we ain't winning out here, because we're not coming from winning conditions. We're coming from failure conditions. And this is one of the reasons why we're failing as a people. All right? There's many reasons, but that's one of the greatest reasons why we ain't even really standing up to these nations economically at all, because we don't even have an economy. All right? An economy is produced by men. Like I mentioned, the word economy goes back to the word house or house management. So to build a house, you need a group. For the most part, you need a bunch of men to build a house. And to maintain that house, you need a bunch of men to keep structure of that house. Point blank in the story. All right? So if you want to know why the so-called Negro, Latino, Native American, Indian, but primarily the so-called Negro, the reason why we ain't doing too good in America, and we never will, because we have matriarchal systems set up. That's the reason why that's the case. All right? And even if, let's just say the American government said we're going to give all black people reparations, guess what? We'll still be in a poor predicament, because we're still going to be under the matriarchal system, which is going to keep us in a failed state. So even if we do get the money, guess what? We're still going to be poor anyway. All right? And that's why the Lord is going to set up a new thing on the earth, which really is an old thing. Okay? The Lord is going to basically renew how things are supposed to be in regarding his people. And what I just read to you, this is what we're going back to. It's going to be by men that the nation will be led. Okay? And then we're going to see the blessings come out of that. All right? We're going back to the old way, which is the good way. Might put that on post-production too, that scripture. But anyway, I said what I said on this right here. I just wanted to bring a couple of things out and showing you that matriarchal societies are failure models. And, can't forget, back to this over here. because I did mention that I wanted to make a few key points in this article without reading it that I remember, right? These people only depend on the tourism. That's how they're able to stay afloat. So they need other people from outside places to go check them out, and that's another way how they stay afloat as they are, showing you once again that this is a failed model, man. The matriarchy thing ain't even working for these people, and it don't work for no people. All right. Even on the other side of the world, like you can look at these people. These are so-called Chinese people. They're not doing good with what they got going on. All right. The people in India, they ain't doing too good. The Kazakh tribe in India, they ain't doing too good. They struggling. All right. They behind economically. So this matriarchal feminism stuff, it ain't working for nobody. All it's doing is destroying people. Okay. Whole communities is being destroyed by this, man. All right. So anyway, let me stop talking. I'm done. Shalom.